Hello guys, Alan here and welcome back to the channel. This video begins part 2 of our conceptual massing in Revit, and in this video we are going to be looking at a little bit of stuff on how we can actually get started with the massing environment and how we can load in this family of massing shapes, or these shapes that we are going to be creating in here, how we can actually load that up into a real Revit project template. Alright, so I'm going to be looking at a lot of stuff in this video, so if you're watching me and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, because you do not want to miss out on the kind of tutorials I'll be dropping in here. So just make sure you like, subscribe to the channel, and you can drop a comment in the comment section if you want, and I'll do well to respond to each and every one of you guys out there. And for your information guys, I've also started a community where I'm actually training people up and building people in their workflows in Revit and how they can maximize their workflows in Revit on any different kind of topic that you are probably going to need a Revit software to do. Alright, so I'm going to get started now with this massing environment series. I'm going to get started with this part, and before I get started I'm going to do a little bit of recap. Alright, so I think in the previous part how we actually got here with all of these shapes you see in here. If you are watching this video for the very first time, just make sure you go back and then watch the part 1 of the very first video that I dropped on this series. Alright, so this is part 2 of the series. So if you want to understand how we were able to achieve all of these kind of shapes in here, you need to go back and then watch the part 1 before you can understand what is happening in here. Alright, so in the previous part we spoke a little bit about the interface, and we went in here, did a little bit of designs, bringing some stuff up a little bit and all of that. But in this part I'm going to be looking at a more critical part in here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to delete. Let me just hit on the tab key, select all of these, or you just make a broad selection like this, and you can just go in there and then you can filter out your plane levels, and then you can just check only this in there. Just make sure you check only your forms, and then you can delete those forms in there. Alright, so let me delete this point as well. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to get started now with what we have to do in this part, and I think I'm going to go into an elevation view in there, and I'm going to show you guys how you can actually create those kind of like wavy kind of roof, or maybe a wall having that wavy form. All right, something that has to do with like Zaha, these concepts. So I'm going to navigate all the way into the east elevation, you can see in here. So I'm going to go into the east elevation in here, and we are going to be doing this with the planes. All right, with all of those reference planes that we have in here. You can see when I move here we have some planes here. When I move here also we have these planes here as well. Alright, we have the first plane here, and then we have this plane also here as well, and then we have this plane also here. So the first plane we have here, that's not the first plane, this is the first plane. Okay, so the first plane we have here is being selected, and this is, let me go into the floor plan, let me get into the floor plan view, select it and get into level 1. Okay, I think level 1 is fine. This level is fine. Let me just bring this down a little bit. Try and bring this down a little bit. And let me just bring this also down a little bit. Let me get back into level 1, and this is perfect. Alright, so I have all these levels showing now. So if I should select this in there, we have this as 3D. Let me select this. We have the center right, and let me select this. This is set to number 2, and then this is set to number 1. Alright, so this is our number 1, and then this is our number 2. So I hope the number 1 is being selected. Perfect. Let me get into the 3D view, and this is alright. Alright, so let me go now into the east elevation, and let me show you guys how we can actually do that, those kind of knob designs in Revit. Alright, so I'm going to get started with the spline through points. Alright, so I'm going to click on that spline through points in there. We are going to create some sort of like splines, and then we are going to join all of them together. Alright, so but before we do that, we are going to check our placement plane, And with this one, I'd want it to start from the reference plane 1. All right, so it's going to start from that reference plane 1. So we are going to draw on that plane, and we're going to go all the way somewhere around here, come here, move all the way here, and come somewhere here, and come. All right, and then leave these here. All right, so this is perfect. And then I'm going to go all the way and draw another one as well. And with this, I'm going to change the reference plane to the 2 in there, and then let's draw this here, bring this somewhere here, bring this here. I actually learned this form of designs from Barker, an architect, so I'm going to bring this somewhere here and then end this here. All right, so I'm going to start all over again and then draw the final point on this plane. All right, the front and back plane in there. Let me just use the left and right. All right, so I'm going to start here and then move all the way to somewhere here, get here, come here, and then move to somewhere around here, get somewhere here, come all the way here, get here, and then move all the way to somewhere here. All right, so this is perfect. I'm going to go into the 3D view so you guys can see what we have in there. So this is the shape we've been able to generate now, and we would like to create a knob form in joining all of these together. All right, to get that kind of wavy roof inside of the Revit software. So I'm going to get started with us getting those wavy forms. So what you want to do is you'd want to hold down your control key, select that first one, and then select the second one, select the third one, and then you go into create form, and then it creates that wavy form of roof. Or maybe we can use this as a roof if you want to kind of like cover a building. It's very interesting how we can actually achieve this on site. So I'm going to show you guys how you can actually manipulate this and work around with all of these that you have in here. But when you hover your mouse pointer on these in there, you're going to notice we have this points here, which is actually not really doing anything. This is just extending those views that we have in there. So you can play around with all of these that you see in here. You can play around with all of them in there. Then we have this also here, which is actually going to send this all the way up. And there are some points on it if you're able to navigate to actually get to those points. So we have this points here where we can actually move this, and there are some points we can actually get. Let me just hit on the tab key and try and select it on this building. We have this here. Let me move this and see. It's moving the entire building. Okay, so this is what you can actually get with this. So we have this point here. If I should select this point and I move this here, you're going to notice it's going to create that kind of form for me. So you can manipulate this to whatever you want to achieve in terms of massing inside of the Revit software. So you can use this to actually manipulate and get whatever you want to achieve in there. Let me just send this all the way to the top. Let me send this all the way to the top somewhere here, and navigate this to somewhere around here. Let me cancel out of there, and I'm going to leave this just as it is. Okay, this is perfect for me. I'm going to leave this just as it is, and we are going to talk about a little bit of something inside of the software. Let me select all of these, and if I should select all of these and then move all of it in there, it's going to move actually. So I've been able to select that point. Let me see what that is going to do, and this is going to move this in there. All right, so you can play around with all of these points in there. All right, so let me try and select all of these and then move it to the side. All right, it's been selected. Move it to the side. Let me navigate into this view, send this up somewhere here. Okay, this is perfect. I think this is okay. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a little bit of difference in here in terms of the model lines and the reference lines. All right, so I'm going to be explaining the difference between the model lines and the reference lines. All right, so let me start off first with the reference line. All right, so when you start off with the reference line, you notice we have the reference plane, the previous reference plane we used. All right, so like I said earlier on in part 1, the moment you select a different reference plane, all right, Revit is always going to remember the last reference plane you used. All right, so you need to always make sure you select the plane that you want to actually draw on before you begin to draw. All right, so I would want to draw on the level 1 plane in there, so I need to select that, and I can even escape out of there or begin to draw that. All right, so I can escape out of there, and that has been selected. So if I should start drawing, Revit is going to remember that I'm actually going to be drawing on this plane. All right, okay, so that's perfect. So now, like I said, I was going to be explaining I'm going to show you guys the difference between the model lines and the reference lines as well. All right, so with the model lines, let me just click on that model line in there and then just draw out a simple plane. All right, let me just draw out a simple plane, something like this, all the way here. This is not what I want. Let me just delete this, and I can just select this spline through points and then just draw a simple model line here. All right, so this is the model line we have in here, and if I should select that, you notice we do not have any planes on this model line. All right, but let me just draw out a simple line using the reference plane so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So let me use this a straight line so you guys can understand that. So I'm going to draw a straight line somewhere around here, and if I should finish that and escape out of there and move my mouse pointer closer to that reference line, you're going to notice it has this reference planes in there, unlike the model lines. All right, unlike the model lines, it's just going to be just a model straight line in there. But with the reference plane lines, you notice when I move my mouse pointer closer to that, we tend to have those reference planes on that line. All right, so you have several options or several planes on that line, and how you can actually use them just on this single line we have created using the reference line. All right, so if I should hit on the tab key to actually select any of those reference lines, let me just navigate all the way somewhere around here and just make sure I select this. You notice we have all of this reference plane lines in there. All right, now let me try and draw a shape on this line so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I've selected that in there, and if I should go in here, you notice we can actually draw on this reference plane line in there. So we can draw a circle in there, and then we can create a form on this same reference plane line in there. All right, so if I should hit on the tab key, we can actually select that and then draw also using these planes as well. So you can come in here, click on set, and then you can click on the particular plane that you want to actually draw on. All right, so you notice it has different kind of shapes. It has one plane on the face here, it has one plane going straight, and then one plane dividing that. It tend to look like this same model in here with a line. All right, so it has one dividing that. You can notice when I move it in there, we have some sort of like a plus sign. All right, a plus sign here, so it means that those are the reference planes it has in there. And if, let's say, I'd want to draw on this plane, on this reference plane here, what I can do is I can just click on set in there and come in here and then click in there, and then now when I go in here to draw, I'm just going to be drawing on this plane. All right, I can actually draw on this plane in there. I can finish this in there, and then I can go into create form, and it's going to create that form for me using this same reference line that we have in there. All right, so I'm going to delete that out of there. And so this is this reference lines that we have in here and how we can actually use them. So I can select this reference line and then click on create form, and we have this in here. All right, now with the reference lines, you're going to notice that it's always going to lock in place your lines in there. You can see it's in there, it's being locked in place. So I'm going to show you guys something in there. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to dissolve it. All right, so if you've watched part 1, you're going to understand what the dissolve actually means. All right, so I'm going to delete this out of there, and with this create form in there, I'm going to just create a simple form with this. And you notice we have this little gizmo on top, and I can actually move this up and down to whatever shape I actually want in there. All right, to whatever shape I actually want. All right, and with this I can also select this shape. Just make sure I select this shape in there, hit on the tab key, select everything, and I can actually add an edge to this I can just add an edge to this in there. Can select this and add an edge in there to this shape, or let me just click on that, get back in here, click on tab, select that, and I can add a profile to this. So I can decide to add a profile to this if I want in there. Let me just add a profile in here. All right, so this profile is in there, and then I can move this out of there, cancel, select that profile again, and then I can move this in there. This is not being set correctly for me, so let me just select this profile, select that profile, and then delete that. Let me just select this again, hit on the tab key, select that, and just let me just start with the edge. I can add an edge to that in there, and I can move this up, move this in here. Yes, this is perfect, and I can move this somewhere here. Let me just move it all the way to somewhere around here. All right, so after we've added that edge in there, we can actually move this to create this form of like a surface in there. All right, now let me get into showing you guys what the reference plane actually does. All right, so let me just click on the reference plane and let me create a simple square. All right, just this simple square in there, select that, and we have this simple square here. And let me also get into using the model lines and then creating a simple square as well. You notice it tends to draw on the same reference plane as the top of that. All right, and let me use this in there, escape out of there. So let me create a form for the reference line in there, create a form for that, and let me just create a simple form. And with this I can select this and also create a form for this. All right, so we have these two forms created. So this is created using the reference line, and this is also created using the model lines as well. So with this, you notice in here we have this little gizmo here as well with the reference line, where we can actually move this to go up and down, up and down, up and down in there. All right, so we can go up and down in here, and we can go sideways also. We can move to the side, all right, to our X and Y axis. We can move it to those sides in there, because like I said earlier on, with the reference lines, it tends to lock in place all of those shapes that you have in there. So if I should click on this model line in there, you notice we do not have any gizmo in there. Let me just click on the surface. All right, just hit on the surface. Just make sure you click on the surface in there. We have this gizmo on top, and we can move this also up and down, and we can move the shape to the side, and we can move the shape back to where we want it, and all of that. We can actually select this. We have this little gizmo. We can manipulate that in different diverse ways, but we can't do that with the reference line. The only thing we can do is we can make sure we just select this line in there, just select this, and then when you move this, it tends to move with all of those shapes in there. But unlike this one, which tends to move with only the ones on the plane, only the ones that you drew on the plane. All right, it's not going to move with the entire shape in there. All right, so this is the difference between this and this in there, the reference lines and then the model lines that we have in here. All right, so this will tend to move with this tends to move with all of its forms in there, unlike the model lines. All right, so I can select this, and then I can move this also as well to create some sort of like a pyramid as well. All right, so we have this shape in here, which is perfect. All right, so now let me show you guys how you can actually create those void forms as well, those void forms in Revit. All right, so let me start off with a simple square and try and create those void forms as well. Let's start off by drawing this, and with this, before I create this form, I'm going to click on that drop down menu in there, and then I can click on the void. All right, and I can actually select this void form, move this into the building. Let me just Control Z out of there, make sure I select everything. Let me just make sure I select everything, hit on the tab key to select everything, and then I can move, hit on the tab key, selecting everything. All right, this is perfect, and then I can move this to somewhere inside of this model. All right, so I have this somewhere here in this model, and I can select the top surface in there. Let me change this to the fine level wireframe, and let me select the surface of this, the surface of this, hit on the tab key, select this surface, and then I can move this up a little bit. All right, it's not really up in there. Let me change this to somewhere around here. Hit on the tab key, select this, and then move this up a little bit. All right, this is perfect. So I'm going to show you guys how you can create those void forms. All right, so I can finish this out of the way. Let me change this back to the hidden line. All right, so we have this void form here, and it's not going to work unless you actually cut it with this one. So I'm going to click on cut, and I'm going to click on this shape and click on my void form as well, and then it's going to cut with that. So that void form is going to cut with this. So that's how you can actually create those void forms in Revit. All right, so we have this void form here, but when you move your mouse pointer closer to that and hit on the tab key, you're going to find that void form, and then you can actually manipulate that by also using toggling around with those with all of those gizmos on the top. All right, with all of those gizmos on the top in there, we can actually play around with all of those gizmos, bringing this down a little bit, and it's going to cut through those void forms as well. So it's not necessarily going to be just that, it's also going to cut through all of those void forms. Now let me bring this kind of surface somewhere around here. All right, this surface somewhere around here, and let me just delete this that we have here and delete this. Let me delete this out of the way. Select everything and delete that. All right, so this is perfect, and I think let me do it with this one. All right, so let me show you guys how you can actually add patterns to this. All right, so how you can actually add patterns to all of these surfaces that you have. So let me start off with this one. All right, let me start off with this one. So what you can do is you can just make sure you select this, hit on the tab key to actually select this, and you notice in here we have divide surface. All right, we have divide surface in there, so we can click on the divide surface in there, and you notice it's going to be divided into the surfaces that we have in here. And in here we have the U grid in there, and then we have the V grid, which is all set to a fixed number of distance. So we have 10 here, and then we have 10 here as well. All right, those are these U grids and V grids. So with this being off, you notice the V grid is being turned off, so we are not going to be able to work with the V grids. So you need to make sure you turn that on if you want to actually work with that. And the U grids are those that goes all around that surface. All right, so I'm going to turn this on, and intersects is something I'm going to be getting into this video. All right, I'm going to be getting more into this in this video. So intersects is also there, which we have a little bit of settings and some stuff that we can actually do with this. So I'm going to select this back in there, and you notice in here we have the surface representation, and if I click on that shop down menu in there, this is what sends us into those settings. All right, where we can add nodes to this and actually host some elements on this surface. So I'm going to be getting more into this in this video as well. I'm going to be getting more into this video. I'm going to be getting more into this and how you can actually work around with this in this series. All right, so you're going to be creating several interesting shapes in there, so I'm going to be getting more into that. All right, so let me just cancel out of there, and those are just a few things I just wanted you guys to know. But when you move into the properties panel in there, you notice in here we have no pattern. All right, and with the U grid is set to the fixed number, which is number 10, like I said earlier on, which is set to that number 10 in there. And with the fixed number here on the V grid, we have 10 also here, justification, which is set to center in there, and we have the grid rotation in there, which is set to 0 degrees, and the belt measurement, all right, which is kind of like the distance in between here. All right, and we have a little bit of offset there, which is going to offset that at the bottom in there. So if I should change this to probably 500 in there, move my mouse pointer, I'm not going to see that the distance really much in there. So this is for the V grids. All right, let me change this to 0, and I'm going to do it for the U grids. Let me add an offset of about 500 in there. You notice it starts to offset that in there. All right, so I'm going to put this back to 0, and in here we are going to notice when you click on the drop down menu here, we have several patterns in there that you can actually use for your surface if you want, and we have a little bit of stuff in there. So if I should click on this in there, You notice we have this kind of like cool surface in there with this shape in there. So you can go in here, and Revit has some surfaces that you can actually use for this. All right, it has some several face patterns that you can actually use in your design. All right, so you can go in there, or you can go into edit, and we have this in there, just the triangle system family, and we can't really make changes to all of this or duplicate this. All right, these are parametric templates families in there. So if I should select this, so Revit is going to give you just a handful of shapes that you can actually work with. All right, so I can select this, and then we can change this in there to probably whatever shape that we want. I think I'm fine. Let me go with this one. Okay, I think I'm fine with this one. This one is more nice in there. Okay, I think I'm fine with this one. So this is perfect for me, and this is fine. All right, so this is how you can actually do this in there. All right, so now you can set up some distances or some parameters for this as a family parameter. All right, you can set up some parameters for this using the reference line. Now, one thing I think I forgot was that in case you should use, let's say, a model line to just draw a straight line, and maybe you wanted to use the reference line, you do not have a problem. What you can do is you can select this in there, and you can change it here. All right, you can go in here to its reference line, just check this, and then it's going to change this to a reference line for you. All right, so if you should use a reference line, and maybe you wanted to, if you should use a model line and maybe you'd wanted to use a reference line, you can actually make that change in there. All right, so you can make that change to change this into a reference line in there. All right, but I'll be getting into more deeper stuff. If you should join my community and actually want to study the Revit software with me, I'm going to be getting into more deeper stuff which I can't cover here because of time. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how we can actually load in some families of the massing of our conceptual masses in there. All right, so you have no idea, this conceptual mass also have their families in there. So let's say if you're not able to actually model up a shape that you desire, all right, now do not worry, Revit has some families in there that you can actually load also into this template and use that as well. All right, so let me show you guys how you can actually load in some of those families in there. So what you want to do is you want to go into the insert tab in there, and after getting into the insert tab, what you want to do now is to import family types in there, and let me just cancel out of there, escape out of there, get into the modify tab. All right, so make sure you're in the insert tab in there, and get into the insert tab, and then go straight into load family in there. And when you get straight into load family, just go a folder back. Now that depends on the system of measurement you are using. All right, I'm using the metric system, and I'm going to change this to list in there, and you can see in here we have mass. All right, and we have several masses in there that we can actually use. All right, we have the arc, square, we have the cone, and all of that in there. All right, so I'm going to load in just a simple pyramid in there, and just load in that pyramid. After your pyramid has been loaded up into the software, what you need to do now is you can go straight into create, and then you can click on component in there, and then you can load in that object that is being created, loaded up into the software. So we can put your pyramids in there, as many as you want, and then that's how you can actually load in all of those conceptual mass families inside of the Revit software. All right, so that's perfect. And now how do we load this into a real Revit project template? So what you need to do is you need to make sure you save your project. So if you haven't saved your project, you need to make sure you actually save your project, and then you can actually load this up into the Revit software by just going in here, load into project. So I'm going to create a new project in there. Let me go into new project and create a metric architectural template in there. This is fine, and I'm going to go back into this view, and I'm going to go into load into project in there, and Revit is going to say it has successfully loaded that in there, and it's going to be visible. All right, so we have all of those items that we created in there. All right, so let me get into the 3D view of our project in there, and we have all of those stuff that we loaded up in there. All right, so we can set up our levels in our pyramid to actually create an actual building, and then use this as a roof for that building in there. All right, so that was just by the way. So this is how you can actually load this in there, and you can go straight into your massing and site, and you notice in here it's being turned on, and when I turn this back on in there, it's now visible. All right, when I turn this off, it's all not going to be visible. So we need to update the phases to whatever parameters that we are going to be using in here, or we can click on our wall in there and we can apply it to this in there, and Revit is going to update that with the wall. All right, so if I should go back in here to mass and site, show mass, you notice that now this in there is now visible even when the mass is off. All right, even when I've still turned off that mass in there. So I'm going to be getting more into this when we are starting to create in some shapes and loading some stuff into our project template inside of the Revit software. All right, so I'm going to end here, and we are going to take off in the next part, which is going to be part 3 of our massing series in Revit. I love you guys, and you can drop a comment in the comment section, and I'll catch you guys in the next part. Peace out.
I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.